Hello guys, today we'll be covering a 1997 horror thriller film called Cube. All relevant links and information for the film can be found in the pinned comment box below. The Cube awaits. Shall we begin? The movie opens on an eyeball with unusual thread-like patterns forming the retina. The camera switches and we see that it belongs to a bald man lying on the floor of an unusual cube-like chamber. As he opens a vault-like door, it appears he's trapped inside a puzzle or maze. Unable to enter that one, he tries a few more until one opens into a small duct. He enters, and the door closes behind him. In the new room, he takes a step forward but triggers a metal grate which quickly dices him into small cubes. The trap mechanism folds itself up and everything fades into white light. The scene changes to a bloody hand rising from a floor duct. A man crawls out and it becomes apparent he's also inside the cube maze. On his jumpsuit is the name Quentin. There's another man in this room, apparently unconscious. Quentin wakes him, but he just leans against the wall, dazed. As Quentin tries to find a new path out of the room, a clanging noise comes from a vault on a different wall. The door opens and Quentin grabs the newcomer, throwing her to the floor. Reflexively, he starts to punch her, but she screams and he comes to his senses. As he apologizes, they hear another woman screaming for help somewhere nearby. Quentin runs to the vault nearest her voice and opens it. A younger woman is climbing down rungs into that room. As she steps onto the floor, he screams for her to stop and she does, terrified. Quentin looks around, then carefully guides her to the room with the others. The first woman demands to know why he was so afraid of the other room, but before he can answer, a vault on the ceiling opens and an old man peers into the room. He joins them and Quentin explains that there are traps in some of the rooms and that one nearly killed him. Noticing the dazed man, the older woman asks him if he's okay and notices his jumpsuit says Worth. Worth explains he hit his head and the older woman reveals she's a doctor. At the same time, the old man has been taking his shoes off. He opens a new vault and throws them inside. He flinches as it triggers a trap and flames fill the other room. He explains that these seem to be motion detection traps. They try to figure out what to do, and the old man, Ren, says he intends to go in a straight line until he gets to the end. Quentin agrees it's as good a plan as any. After this conversation, Ren throws his boot in the next room, then pulls it back using the extra laces he tied to it. He declares the room clean and climbs in. They go from room to room until finally, Ren stops, saying there's a different sensor in that room the boot cannot detect. Quentin wants to know how he could possibly know that, then suddenly recognizes Ren's name and realizes he's a prisoner called the Ren, who's escaped several prisons and is a sensor expert. Levin is excited that he can get them out, but as the older man jumps into the next room, he hears a hiss when he steps on a floor plate, and acid sprays his face, burning away his skin. The vault closes, but Quentin quickly opens it and drags Ren back into the room, but he convulses on the floor and dies. He has Levin look at a series of numbers within each duct that they thought were room numbers. He realizes they're all prime numbers and makes the assumption that if any room has a number that is not prime, it's trapped. She says the next room is safe. Quentin is doubtful, but Levin says she looked at the numbers in the other rooms, and each one that was trapped had prime numbers. Holloway boots the room, and it seems okay, so Quentin prepares to go inside. Instead, Levin jumps in to test her theory, and all is well. 9 or 10 hours pass with Levin calculating the numbers as they go. Periodically, they hear a strange whooshing sound and feel a rumble. Finally, they reach a room where the only safe path is up. The door seems stuck, so Quentin gives it a heave, dropping a red-haired man into the room with them. The newcomer points out that their room is green, then walks over and starts banging his head against the wall. Quentin sends Dr. Holloway to figure out what's up with him. She stops him and he points out again that this room is green and that he wants to go back to the blue room. Holloway determines that he must have a mental disability and that his name is Kazan. She offers to take care of him. A few rooms later, Levin clears a room and Holloway goes through. When she lands, she suddenly grasps her throat and the others, especially Kazan, freak out, figuring it must be gas. Eventually, they come to a different room. Worth says the numbers aren't prime, and Levin agrees, so Quentin heads into the room. He's a few steps in when she yells for him to stop. He's suddenly surrounded by vertical metal filaments that spin around him. Immediately, he leaps between them as they collapse in where he was standing, slicing his leg, but still alive. Holloway darts in to help him, and Kazan is screaming again, which causes Quentin to shout for someone to stop him. Since Holloway is busy with the injured leg, They send Worth. Once the man is gone and the door closed, Quentin growls that somehow Worth knew this room was trapped. He just has a feeling. Levin says she checked the numbers too, but he doesn't care. After the two men return, they decide to rest. During this time, Quentin starts arguing with Worth over his lack of usefulness and pessimistic attitude. As tempers boil over and Quentin assures the other man he will get out of there, Worth screams that there is no way out. Everyone looks at him, and Quentin nods knowingly, finally getting the man to reveal that he is somehow part of this situation. Worth finally reveals that he was contracted to design the outer shell for the cube. He says he doesn't know anything about the numbers or anything inside here. He just helped design the exterior. As they question him, he insists he does not know who hired him or the cube's purpose, just that he talked to some people on the phone and each person on the project did some small part of the job. Quentin doesn't like Worth's explanation or attitude, and he attacks the other man until Levin grabs his arm, saying they need the designer because he's the only one that knows anything about this place. While Worth is lying on the ground, Levin asks him about a door. He says there's one on the outer shell, but does not know where, and expects that it's sealed on the outside. She asks about the dimensions of the shell and he tells her, so she starts measuring off steps in the room. She does some math and realizes the numbers on the door are Descartes' system of Cartesian coordinates, used to plot points in geometry, and are grid markers for their location. After they rest, she leads them towards the edge of the cube. However, a few rooms later, she finds coordinates that she says do not make any sense because if it was accurate, they would be outside of the cube, and they're not. This room should not exist. Nonetheless, they continue on. Eventually, they face a floor room. As they wonder if it's trapped or not, Kazan yells "trap" over and over and triggers a sonic trap of sharp metal stakes. Rather than go back and find a new way, Quentin wants to find a way through the room. Since the room is sound activated, he says they just need to be quiet. Because of this, he wants to leave Kazan behind but is overruled. They carefully lower Worth in first, and he swings from bar to bar, trying to be quiet. Reaching the other side, he opens the door and crawls inside, sweating from anxiety. One by one, the others go, even Kazan, although he needs help from Holloway. As Quentin is navigating through the room, Kazan makes a sound and triggers the trap. Quentin throws himself through the door before he's skewered. He rages in Kazan's face for being a danger until Holloway stops him. He turns his rage on her and defends Levin, who defends the doctor against his hateful words. Holloway says it's no wonder Quentin's wife left him, and that he has a thing for young girls, and he gives her face a full-armed slap. When she eventually asked if he hit his children that way, he seems stunned. As the uncomfortable moment stretches on, Levin finally reminds them they have another door to investigate. When Worth opens this one, Kazan says, "Nighttime." The door opens up to the space between the shell. It's dark, and the only way to check to see if there's a door on the other end of the space is to tie their shoes together and have someone swing over. After a brief argument, Holloway volunteers, saying it's her turn anyway. Once the clothes rope is complete, the others lower Holloway down as far as they can. She pushes off the wall and swings to try to get a look at the other side. On the third try, a loud whoosh noise comes and the ground shakes, causing the group to lose their grip on the rope. Holloway plummets, but Quentin leaps and catches it before it disappears, nearly falling out himself before the others get hold of him. She climbs up as Quentin also pulls the rope, but just as she gets to him and smiles, his face changes. He lets go of her hand and she falls. He tells the other that the doctor slipped. Kazan begins to wail and slap at his head. Levin looks defeated and Worth suggests they rest before going back to find a new way. Time passes as they sleep. A short time later, Levin awakens when Quentin puts a hand over her mouth, telling her to be quiet. He's taken the boot from Worth and picks her up, carrying her through the vault door. On the other side, he starts raving about how the two of them are the key and that they need to get to the bottom so she can think. He tells her the other two are traps and must be left behind. She tries to run and he grabs her, but Worth comes to her rescue, followed by Kazan. Quentin tells her that the other two are spies, just like Holloway, because she somehow had information about his family and crossed the line. They realize then that he dropped the doctor, and Worth tells him to give them the boot and go. Instead, Quentin beats Worth with it, then throws him down a floor hatch as the other two huddle in the corner. Surprisingly, they hear Worth laughing down there, and when they join him, they see him staring at Ren's body and realize they've come full circle. Even Quentin finally loses his confidence and breaks down crying, telling Worth he was right, there is no way out. Despite the general sense of hopelessness, Worth suddenly becomes curious about the room that originally killed Wren. He opens the door and there's nothing but darkness. He wants to know why the room is now gone. Irritated, Quentin throws their precious boot at him, and it sails out the door and drops into the edge between the shell. This upsets Worth, but he tells them the only explanation is that they have not been going in circles, but the rooms have been shifting, hence the weird rumbling sound and shaking. Thinking this through, Levin realizes she can use the markers to figure out which rooms connect to where, and that the key is the room with the strange coordinates she found earlier. When in the right position, it serves as a bridge out. She figures it out, but the factoring is too complicated to even do it with a computer. When Quentin tells her to figure it out, she screams in his face, saying she can't even solve the first number. Suddenly, Kazan spouts out the number 2. Shocked, they realize he's a math prodigy, and Worth tests him on the coordinates to a room. It seems safe, but Quentin throws Worth in there to test it. It is indeed safe. Quentin gets more and more aggressive as they go, bullying everyone. Finally, he starts to go through one vault, and Worth shoves the door up into his throat and holds it there while Kazan figures out the safe room. Once they know, he lets Quentin fall inside the other room and closes the door. They hurry on. However, Quentin eventually catches up. Worth sets a trap for him, opening a floor vault under his feet from beneath. Quentin hits the floor unconscious. The others hurry to get away, making their way toward the bridge room. Unfortunately, after several rooms, the cube shifts just after Worth and Levin go through a vault, leaving Kazan behind as it moves his room elsewhere. Yet they can still hear him wailing. Worth sets off after him and finds him a few rooms away. While Worth is trying to convince Kazan to climb up to his ceiling room, Levin screams that she's in the room that visits the bridge next. She tells him to hurry and join her. Ironically, this is the same room where they started. Immediately after they get inside, the room shifts like an elevator. When they try the door, there's only the blackness of the shell. So they wait for the next round. When the room shifts again, the bridge is there. The last door stands before them. Kazan opens it, and sunlight shines in, illuminating them. Despite the exit in sight, Worth sits down and tells the others to go because he has nothing waiting for him out there. Levin tries to convince him to leave, but suddenly gasps when the handle of a vault door juts out of her chest. It's Quentin, ready for some revenge. Worth charges him and they struggle, but he's quickly overpowered. He screams for Kazan to go through the door just before Quentin stabs him too. Kazan opens the door and climbs out, but Quentin grabs his shirt as he enters the duct. The room begins to rumble, and just before he makes it completely through, Worth grabs his arm from the other side. The room shifts, tearing him in half. Inside the room, the severely injured Worth collapses next to Levin's body. However, not all is lost. Kazan turns and walks blissfully into the sunlight.